Stephen said very clearly what we hear almost every day in the House of Commons, which is a total absence of leadership. It's denial, it's division, and it's destruction of the policies that we have put into place, which is Pierre Poilievre's agenda. It's sad. This is a second-year anniversary of being a leader. It's also a great coincidence that Mark Carney and many other business leaders and economists have been saying for the last while and keep repeating that, the economy and the environment go hand in hand, go together in 2024. The only time I think I heard Pierre Poilievre speak about the impact of environmental change was when he said last year, when the forests across Canada were burning, well, the answer is easy. You should just send more water. You should put more water on these fires to extinguish them and forget about the prevention and the fight against climate change.
How do you explain the fact that he is doing so well on the polls? You say, oh, well, he doesn't have a plan to fight climate change. Canadians, opinion polls suggest, are pretty supportive of him. How do you make sense of that?
Well, I think clearly we need to do a better job of explaining some of the things we've been doing, carbon pricing certainly being one of them. We've seen certainly in the last few months that there's a shift on the issue of carbon pricing in Canada. I think we need to continue explaining why we're doing this to Canadians, why we need to fight climate change, why we're putting in place these measures that we are putting in place. But it is more complex to explain that than to say you should just not do this, you should not do this, not do that, without offering anything. It's the total absence, as Jean-Yves was saying, it's the absence of vision, it's the absence of plan. He has no measure to offer when it comes to fighting climate change, adapting to the impacts of climate change. He would rip apart the first ever national adaptation strategy, which will help save lives in Canada, which has already started to help save lives, which will save Canadians billions of dollars. If we don't do that, Canadian taxpayers are on the hook for, according to various estimates, between $25 and $35 billion of climate change impacts per year. We're all paying for this. No one will get a bill home saying this is your climate change impacts bill for the year, but we will all be paying for that. And unfortunately, Mr. Poilievre has nothing to say about that.
I'll just add something. So sorry to be rude and to interrupt the
You're never
conversation.
Rude,
it's a great question that you ask about carbon pricing. Now, the one reason for which Pierre Poilievre might want to have an election very soon on axe the tax and carbon pricing is that he's starting to feel the change in Canadians' understanding of the great value of that carbon pricing. Now, we have changed the name now to make it better understood that there's a carbon rebate that comes with carbon pricing. Now, if you look at the numbers, you note that Canadians understand much better now in September 2024 that 8 out of 10 of Canadians receive more in their pockets than they pay through the carbon price. Now, that's not good news for Pierre Poilievre, now, who has never acknowledged that with carbon pricing also comes a carbon rebate, which makes life more affordable for 8 families out of 10. I'm an economist, and it's very rare that an economic policy achieves the goal of, say, reducing pollution and putting more money in the pockets of the majority of middle-class and lower-income Canadians. Now, he knows that, and he fears that. Canadians are starting to understand that it's good for affordability, it's also good for reducing pollution, and it's also great, as Mark Carney was saying, and as loads of business leaders are telling, it's also great for prosperity, economic growth, creation of good middle-class jobs across Canada.
Mark Carney has also said that the carbon tax has served its purpose, that any alternative climate policy proposal would have to be as good. I'm wondering, are you ready to...
I've said that as well. I've said that as well.
Are you ready to hear advice from them about whether the carbon tax should be scrapped or changed in any way? How would you receive such
I think what Mr. Carney, and I've spoken with Mark about this a number of times, has said, is that those who say that we should scrap carbon pricing need to tell us what they would replace it with. And I've said that many times. If someone in this country, on this planet, in this solar system, in this universe, can show me a measure that will give us 40% of our 2030 emission reduction targets at no cost to Canadians, I'll take it right away. I'm buying it. There is no such measure. It is the most efficient way of reducing emission. It's not the only one, because we're doing a bunch of other things. Investment, we're doing clean electricity standards, we're working on zero-emission vehicles, investing in a cleaner economy. There's lots of other things we're doing. But if there's a measure out there that will give us 40% of our emission reduction by 2030, I've been looking at this for a quarter of a century, and frankly, I don't know about it.
And I would...
Non, en fait, c'est pas ce que M. Carney a dit. M. Carney a dit ceux qui pensent qu'on devrait ne pas faire la tarification carbone ont le devoir, l'obligation de nous dire ce qu'on devrait faire à la place. C'est ce qu'il a dit.
And I would add two more things. In addition to the benefits that Stephen mentioned, not only does it come with no cost to Canadians, but again, for 8 out of 10 families, it comes with a benefit. Now they get more in their pockets. An additional benefit is an international border benefit. Soon you'll be hearing, if you haven't heard about this, border adjustments, carbon border adjustments, which mean that if Canada wants to maintain competitiveness, wants to keep being competitive with the rest of the world, including with Europe, which is currently designing a carbon adjustment tariff with those countries that don't have a carbon price. Now, Canada has a carbon price and therefore is able to compete and to keep competing competitively with European countries in the future, in the long term and in the short term. Now, Pierre Poilievre's problem is that he will soon be reminded by many business leaders that if he keeps being against carbon taxation, he is going to undermine the competitiveness of Canadian industries abroad. So he's going to explain why he should undermine the ability of businesses and workers to compete internationally, given his resistance and his perhaps lack of understanding of the importance of carbon pricing in Canada and internationally.
Question? You say the people are slowly getting the message, especially in September, you're seeing a change where people are kind of saying, okay, well, they're starting to understand carbon pricing, they're starting to understand, and they're kind of shifting away towards the conservative end. VIU political expert Dr. Michael McKenzie has said exactly the opposite. People are really resonating with the conservative brand of it because I'm up here in Vancouver Island, $2 a liter for gas, increase in groceries, increase in their heat, increase in their homes, increase in rent. That's what's really starting to resonate with people on Vancouver Island, and that's why, according to this expert, they're shifting away from the liberal brand. Can you explain that?
So I haven't seen this opinion by this expert, and I'm no expert on Vancouver Island politics. Obviously, what Pierre Poilievre is trying to do is conflate a number of things together. Of course, we know that inflation has affected purchasing power of many Canadians and is affecting their bottom line. The Bank of Canada was very clear. Carbon pricing is not a contributor to inflation in this country. So I think our job is to continue explaining to Canadians the differences between these things. And we're seeing inflation come back. We're seeing wages starting to catch up to what we've seen in terms of inflation. So I mean, Pierre Poilievre is simply not telling the truth. He's lying to Canadians about this, and as well as a number of other things. We need to keep explaining why these things are important, both in terms of affordability, as Jean-Yves has outlined. How often do you get a policy that allows you to reduce pollution and help Canadians, 8 out of 10 Canadian families with affordability? You don't get that very often. It's both an environment and a social measure at the same time. We need to continue explaining that, and Pierre Poilievre can continue with his meaningless slogans.
Yeah.
Mr. Gilbert, have you decided whether you're attending COP29 in Azerbaijan this year?
I will most likely be going. As you can understand, we're in a minority government. It's a bit complicated to get out of the House when it's sitting and be out of the country, but most likely I will be there, yes.
Okay, we're going to have, by the way, to share that audio with you from that expert, just so you know.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you.
Merci.
Merci.